Okay, I think at this point, what we're going to do is if the panelists, there's Marty and Russ, if you could come back to us, that would be great. How you doing? We're going to just discuss some things. I have some questions that I've sort of come up with. I'm sure, I want to keep it open. We do have some sort of more technical questions in the Q&A. I'm going to start with, and I want to invite the audience also, if there's sort of like topics you want to discuss, please put some questions in. Maybe I can just start it off though. I think, so we really heard, I think, like a really great range of talks, touching on many different exciting things happening in silico drug discovery and design. I'm curious, sort of a basic question of what are you most excited about in this landscape? And I realize like it's going to be different for everybody because we all have different things that we kind of, really like. But have you thought about that? Like, what do you think is the most exciting? Pat, can I start with you since you're unmuted?
Sure. I guess the most exciting thing for me now is this intersection that we're encountering between physics-based methods and machine learning. And I think because of that, we're able to do things on a much larger scale at much higher resolution than we could do before. But the thing that excites me the most is we have this continuum sort of with protein structure prediction at one end. You've got the AlphaFold-ish techniques. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got things like all-atom molecular dynamics. And it's all kind of coming together. And I think, in a couple of years, we're all going to be just doing these multi-scale simulations that are going to enable us to do things that we could never even think about doing.
I'm smiling to hear you say that. I'm kind of surprised. I like the idea of everybody running multi-scale simulations. I think that would be definitely cool. I do have a predictions question, but I was going to save that for the end, but I still like it. So Marty, you're unmuted. Is there anything you're particularly excited about?
I mean, you heard those who attended heard some of what I had to say in the kickoff, so you know a little bit about that. But it echoes some of what Pat's saying. It echoes some of the themes that Joel was pulling out at the end, which is it's not just one hammer. I'm going to go out and find some nails to hammer. Yeah. It's how do I bring all of those things together, both computationally and in the wet lab. So on the multiomics side, what are the data sets that inform us across all of these things? And then what are the computational methods that integrate those data together to understand disease biology better and to understand whether our molecules are impacting the system in the right way? And you would fall off your chair if I said that we should be doing more MD simulations. So I'm not going to say that.
You can tell I'm excited. Yeah, no, that's great. Russ, you're unmuted. Thank you, Marty. You're unmuted. What are you excited about?
So somebody said it this morning, and I apologize to them because there was a bunch of great talks, and I can't remember, but they said like the most efficient experiment is no experiment at all. And the idea, what I'm excited about is the idea that we'll be able to do a ton of pretty cheap computation. It's not free, but compared to a lot of experiments, and so that when we're doing our experiments, they will be confirmatory of things that we're pretty darn sure of. And I've seen that already happen in some of our work where we went to a mouse and we knew we had to do the mouse, but we knew it was going to work. And when that happens, you're in a very good mood and you don't spend a lot of money. Maybe it was Cheryl who said, I don't know who said it, but I think that's where we're headed, and that's going to really open up a lot of opportunities because you really should do everything computational, even with the warts of the computation. And, we know about the warts. That's in many ways, it's been a 2-day meeting about warts. But you should do all of that before you do your experiments, because then you have some expectation that you're not going to be doing really silly experiments that are not worthwhile. And so I'm excited about that because then computer folks are actually contributing, God forbid.
All right. Joel, how about any thoughts on what you find particularly exciting? I loved your talk, by the way.
Oh, thanks. I think the fact that the engineering and technological platforms are really catching up to the computation, and we're co-creating those at the same time for the kind, the scale, and the quality of data and the reproducibility that we actually need. And like Marty was talking about, just the fact that now we're in a space to be able to integrate all these different kinds of multimodal types to make stuff that's really powerful in terms of multiomics, genetics, phenomics, all at the same time to make more important decisions. There's a lot to do. It's exciting.
Yeah. Very cool. So a flip of that question is then, oh my God, I have so many things to talk about, but a flip of that question is, I guess, what do you, and maybe you each touched on this, but just sort of stepping back, what do you view as like the biggest challenge to, you know, to making progress, I guess, in the particular space, maybe of what you're excited about? You know, is it the data? Is it the algorithms? Is it the team? What do you think?
If I could start, very much from an academic perspective, compute is killing us. My colleagues in industry might have a better situation, although I have some intelligence that they have some pain as well. But for the first time in my career, students are proposing projects where I say, how are we going to do that? Like, how are we going to pay for that compute? And I've never had that. Like, we have clusters, we have supercomputers, we always figured out a way. But I am concerned as an academic about our ability to make contributions at scale. And so that's fine. We can like try to make our contributions and be strategic, but I do worry that, you know, it's funny because you were talking about the merging of molecular dynamics and AI, ML, the two most expensive compute things, literally the things that use the supercomputers.
Why not bring them together, right?
At the national labs the most. And we just want more of that. And we want to do a cross product of AI. And I'm, by the way, I totally agree with that. But we really do have some compute challenges, I think. And I'd love to hear from colleagues in industry if like that's just a local and peculiar problem for me and maybe wrong.
I would say, Russ, that it's not a unique and peculiar problem for you. I'm going to throw in a non sequitur just because it's on my mind when we talk about compute. I've heard so many people in the AI world, in the public domain, talking about how the singularity is coming and the computers are going to be able to think. You cannot generate enough power to run a big enough computer to have the singularity happen. So that's crazy talk. And rolling it back to the simpler questions here, some of our aspirations are probably bigger than the compute that we have in hand right now. And so it is the next big intuitive leap probably does need other compute infrastructures, and it probably needs compute infrastructures that are not quantum computing, because those are even more energy hogs than the stuff we run right now. So that's perhaps a tangent, but just saying, Russ, I kind of agree with you. And yes, I am the person who has to figure out the budget for the compute we want to do across all of the different resources, across all of the projects going on in Amgen. And so it is a perennial problem and continues to be one. I don't know that it's
an interesting
scientific problem, but it is very much a logistical and operational challenge for us.
I don't know. I don't see it that way. I think
Really?
the vast majority of especially the machine learning models I'm building for things like property prediction, I can do this on my laptop. Yeah. I don't need big compute to do a lot of this. You know, I think the biggest thing that we're lacking is data. You know, it hurts me to see all of these smart kids at MIT out there building machine learning models on terrible data sets. I think if we could do anything, especially in terms of just property prediction for drug discovery, the most significant thing we could do is have a publicly funded effort to generate high quality data in a consistent fashion and make that publicly available.
Don't disagree about the data question. I would say that there's a range of models that are happening on my team. And if someone is trying to build a model that is processing a bunch of images coming out of huge single cell experiments and layer on top of that the transcriptomics and the proteomics, that becomes a big compute problem for me. Whereas some of the other models, absolutely, just, let me give you more memory for your laptop so that it's running efficiently enough for you. And so it's that span. That being said, you're exactly right. I can't even train those models unless I have the data for those, unless I've generated those images. And I can't generate those images in the right way if I haven't proactively thought about what's the question I'm trying to answer, what are the data that will help me to answer it, and how do we construct an experiment, going back to some of my comments the other day, that is an appropriate model at the right level of specificity for the question we're trying to ask. So I agree with you, Pat. I just think that there's some span across the kinds of compute we do. And really, if Rommie wants to do these all atom simulations and then train a bunch of stuff on top of it, she is going to need a bunch of GPU.
Yeah, it takes a lot of big compute. Joel, any comments?
No, I would agree with Marty. Just from the vast variety of stuff that you would do in target ID, precision medicine compared to actual molecule design, really far outweighs the results. And especially as companies transition to the cloud and potentially back to a hybrid model, I do not envy her trying to figure out the budget for everything. So, yep.
Oh, there was some transition out of that, you mean? I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Sometimes it's cheaper to do things back on-prem, and yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. So it's like similar to us. Okay.
Yeah. There's always going to be this tension between IT departments. And let's actually step back a second. Cloud computing is just computing that's on someone else's premises. It's still on.
Yes. Yeah. It's just not my paperweight at the end of it. So a question too. So Pat, you mentioned that, and it's true. Things are they feel like they're moving. You said 100 miles per hour. Honestly, I feel faster. I feel like it's faster. I was listening to some of these talks and I thought, oh my God, is this really happening on planet Earth? How do you all keep up with things moving so fast? I mean, is there any, I don't know, how are you handling it and keeping pace with the advances? Because it's crazy.
Yeah, I think it's, it's having a group of people who are really excited about the field and who are constantly reading, going to meetings, talking to people, and then, having conversations
filtering out
among that group. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough, because there's probably, 20 machine learning in drug discovery papers that show up on arXiv every week. So it is getting just ridiculous to try to keep up.
Yeah.
On our lab Slack, we have an interesting papers channel, and I used to try to give a little one-liner, like an impression of the paper, maybe to help the students, practice their own critical, and forget about it. Like right now, it's almost like a scrolling Twitter.
It's like a feed.
And it's just killing. And so it's where focus and knowing what you're trying to do becomes more important, because if you can't be just opportunistic, because you'll be context switching every 10 minutes. So you have to have a plan. You have to realize that the plan may have to change, but the focus has to be there. And this is for PhD students, but also for startups. And I think for big pharma, the focus and the plan, you have to believe in it and stick to it. Every now and then there'll be a very disruptive technology, but most technologies are only a little disruptive to your plan.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they blow your plan out of the water, and that's the one you worry about, right?
Yeah. There was a question from the audience that I did extract. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure who asked it. I think it was an anonymous attendee. But the question was, what do you think are some of the challenges one can expect to see in this field as a young scientist? And any suggestion on how they can be addressed? Or, I can put on my professor hat and thinking about students and the different disciplines, are there specific things that you feel like are lacking or need to be addressed that are maybe a little bit different now? Are there kind of thoughts on that?
One thing that worries me is data scientists who are not connected to a domain of expertise. Like, if you want to be in this field, it's good to know a little bit of chemistry or a lot of chemistry and a little bit or a lot of biology. And some people are being sold this like general and I can't imagine that there's any domain where you would be happy hiring a kind of hired gun data scientist who doesn't know anything about your domain, but it's for sure. But I won't speak for other domains. In biology, chemistry, and medicine, for sure, you're not that useful if you're just going to turn the crank and you don't understand the problem and understand the data. And so I think that the advice to young people is make sure that you don't become an undifferentiated data scientist, but a data scientist who knows something else about something that is in the world.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think I always try to urge people to sit at the center of a Venn diagram consisting of, yes, you need the hacking skills, you need to understand machine learning, you definitely need that domain expertise. And then I think you need to know enough math and statistics to know whether you're fooling yourself.
I knew you were going to say that. Marty.
And I'm going to be honest with you that even as the pace of life changes, as 6 billion papers come out every week and all of that, the core skills that our new hirees need to have haven't changed any, right?
Really? Yeah.
I still want that person who is an expert in something, but has the ability to learn new things and to teach to others. I still want that person who is rigorous enough in their thinking and not fooling themselves enough in their interpreting their results that they'll even make Pat Walters happy. I still want someone who can come in and communicate their concepts and their depth of knowledge to a non-expert audience in a useful way. So at the root of it, I don't think the core behaviors have changed at all in what we need. There's maybe some additions around for all of us, including
the
here around how do we ride the wave of change and maintain resilience there. But I think it's the same set of skills that I'm looking for. And I couldn't agree more with Russ and Pat that you do want to be able to speak chemistry to a medicinal chemist if you want them to make
you have to do that. Yeah. Joel, you unmuted yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everybody, and especially resonate with what Marty was saying around the core skills. You know, we still see the computational scientists being that translator between, you know, the deep data engineers, technical expertise to be able to communicate what requirements are, and then also working with the automation teams, working with the actual experimental scientists, and really being that kind of hub. So if you don't know something that you're talking about, that'll become very obvious, and that's really that's a pretty poor fit for the job. And to get to the point around sort of the general data scientists, machine learning scientists, I can't count the number of times that I've talked to people who have deployed models for something, and I asked them what the actual impact of that was, and they can't tell me because they were just told to build a model and don't care about what happens afterwards. So the people who have the subject matter expertise, or at least the agility to talk to project teams and understand what drug discovery is, to know what their role is and how to make an impact in things, totally key to success.
Yeah, I agree. So keeping my professor hat on, making drugs is not really the purview of academia, right? I mean, that's just, we can contribute to little bits of it, but that's really sort of an industrial scale thing. In the past, I mean, typically academics might be developing new methods, right? Doing more sort of like slower, long time scale project type work, maybe focusing on learning fundamental biology, Regarding methods, I had an interesting sort of Twitter chat with Vijay Pandey, who was sort of making the argument that actually there's so much great method stuff happening in industry, and, you should come over because your budget's going to be bigger and you could do more things, which I thought was really interesting. but so I just wanted to ask, like, so how do you view the role of academia in this space? Are there particular things that you sort of look towards us for, other than the pipeline of, like, your next team, or in terms of like methods and sort of thought direction, or no?
I think, especially in terms of machine learning, I love the fact that academia is doing a lot of fundamental research. People are doing research on things like, how can I use a diffusion model to generate a molecule? But then, I feel like we in industry have a responsibility to try that out and provide feedback. And one of the things that I try to do, at least, if somebody will publish a paper and then they'll have a Git repo with their code, I think it's incumbent on us then to say, great, let's try that out. And maybe we can't give you back the exact structures, but I think we can give you back some advice on how you can make this more practically useful.
And I do think there's some of the innovation around experimental techniques that generate certain kinds of data that then can feed models, where there's a big aspect of that fosters ideas inside of academia that we don't necessarily have the day in, day out time to do in industry.
Right. Yeah, or maybe, the particular expertise and so forth with different microscopies and so on.
And how can you, and so
I would say there's
sorry, Joel, I didn't mean to interrupt. You go ahead.
No. Sorry. I was just actually I feel like I'm agreeing with you a lot, Marty. Agree with that, and also expand on sort of the academia model isn't also just like, partnership with one lab, right? There's all kinds of consortia within an actual university where we're all working together and contributing different methods that maybe, a particular company would really want to invest in that because of the group thing that you're putting together. So I think there's a bunch of different models, especially as technology gets a lot bigger, and as research gets certainly more collaborative.
All right, cool. Let's see, what else? Oh, on teams. What's your, I personally, I think, and of course it's evident, obviously, drug discovery is a huge team, it's team science across the board. Do you have, and that's so important, and it's so hard. It's not always that people come together and they gel in a way where everybody's rowing in the same direction. But once you get that, if you can really sort of like cultivate that in any organization, I think, whether it's an academic lab or your own group or the whole place, it can be awesome. Do you have thoughts or advice for folks, like what you've learned about making those strong teams?
Would you like to talk for several hours on end on this topic?
Well, we still have 20 minutes.
I think it's such an important topic. And, many of you have heard me whine about that's why I came back to industry, is because I missed working on interdependent teams that could rely on each other and were reliable for each other. That is trust. That is the function that needs to happen. And so one of it is just a mindset thing. I have some in the room will have heard my analogy before of wave particle duality as the way we should approach our life, and being mindful about when I'm a particle contributing my personal expertise versus when I'm a member of a team integrating together. I also think that it's important, and most companies spend a lot of time on skills building for building teams. How can I be aware of my preferences, my ways of carrying myself in the world? How am I aware of that in relationship to the other people around me? And then beyond that, skills training around what are some organizational and process tools we can use to make sure that our matrix teams know what the goal is, what they're contributing, and how it lines up together, and so forth. And so it really is a topic that I could talk on for way too long. So I'm going to shut up and turn it over to my colleagues, Pat and Joel in particular, since we come from an industry perspective, about how you think about forging effective teams. And I mean, Pat, you've been at several different sizes. Joel, I think you've been in the monstrosity that is GSK for most, if not all, of your industry life. How does that play out in your world?
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that Marti said. I think, there's so much that's communication. It's all about appreciation. It's about craftsmanship and really appreciating the craftsmanship of others. But I think more than anything, at least for me, it's been just trying to find people with the right mindset and building the right team, and trying to build a team of people who are not only appreciative of other disciplines, but people who are enthusiastic. Hiring structural biologists who are enthusiastic about medicinal chemistry, hiring medicinal chemists who are enthusiastic about pharmacology. And I think it's really, if you can create this situation where you've got people who are eager to learn from one another, to me, that's where the magic is.
Yeah. No, I would agree. And it can be really hard to do. I think I feel like it's a particular challenge for academia because we have a little bit more turnover also, in the teams because we're training and people leave. But then again, I recognize that people do leave industry and so forth. But Joel, sorry, I should let you say something.
No, I would obviously agree with Pat and Marti's experiences. I think it starts at hiring, right? Looking for people specifically with those kinds of qualities, as opposed to letting somebody in who doesn't exemplify those values, then figure out, okay, what do I do with them now? And bring a whole team down. And so we try to screen for those liabilities, unsurprisingly. But, being intentional about high performing team exercises, really understanding people's communication styles. Absolutely, the investment is there. And so again, getting back to advice for young people into the field, being able to communicate and get along with others is just as important as your technical knowledge.
And I would
also, I think so. Yeah.
I would agree with Joel on that one as well. I would say the reward structures in industry, it mean that we have to pay attention to this. It's just, you can't be successful as a pharmaceutical or biotech company if you don't have that approach to life in some way baked in.
Yeah.
And so the reward structures in academia are very different.
They disincentivize it. I know. It's terrible. Yeah. All the reward structures. Yeah. Russ, do you have any comments on that just generally?
I mean, just to confirm, I've been an academic my whole life, but when I did a startup and I took a sabbatical at the startup, it was like a breath of fresh air, that it wasn't like this star system where it was about individual stars who were, and then a star in the middle. Yeah. And that was all out the door. And it was all about the mission of the company. And at that stage, it was just very invigorating. And I said to myself, for the first time in 35 years, because I never had a real job. I said, now I see why being in industry can be very satisfying, because I was on these functional teams where there wasn't too much BS. We were lucky. Politics hadn't occurred yet in the company, and they were all kind of rowing in the same direction. I said, okay, this is why it's cool, because they're going to get stuff done, and they did, that we would never be able to do in academia.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing, Marti, I could talk about for a long time, is like trying to change that whole incentive structure also with publishing and everything. And I'll just make a comment because I want to make sure we still have time for maybe a couple more questions. But, during COVID also for me, I mean, that was a time too where we had this shedding in academia, well, of everywhere, but also really in academia, this sort of shedding of all of our kind of like normal routines. And so people were sharing and talking, and we had this like team goal, and it's sort of, you did lose the ego quite a bit. And, man, sometimes, I mean, I don't miss that, but it was an experience. It was sort of very different than our sort of ordinary ways of doing.
I think what you're saying is you don't want another global pandemic just to get that back.
Correct.
But the themes that you're describing there are exactly the themes that I'm hearing from Pat and from Joel. When
Yeah.
we walk into this company, our goal is to drive medicines towards patients so they feel better. We're all aligned
Like
in that.
going towards, yeah,
And we
that's really
all
fun.
know that there's this arc forward that we're all invested in together. And so, yes, in any time you get two people together, there will be some politics. That goes without speaking. But the fact that is, and that's why I came back to industry, is because I did that work with the DOE COVID discovery project and got to
Very different, huh?
9 national labs, and to see them merge into a team and step into action was just invigorating and brought me back home where I belong.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, cool. Sorry, I lost tracks. This is why I have to really pay attention. Okay. Okay, is it time for predictions or is it too early? Are we I do want you all to make a prediction, about the future, whatever they say about that. About, what do you think the drug discovery process is going to look like 10 years from now? Do you think it's going to be radically different? Is everything going to be self-driving labs like robots? Will people know how to pipette? Or are we still going to be hoping for more data? Like, what do folks think? Maybe 10 years. So that puts us at what, 2034?
I'm not talking first.
Who wants to bite first? Or do you think, because, often one gets the impression like, yeah, it really is all changing so fast. But then, it's like, yeah, actually, is it?
Okay, I'll make a prediction.
Bite.
I'm worried that my love and expertise about small molecules is a fading thing because of CRISPR.
I'm worried about that.
And because of, it's not really a worry, but I am so excited. Let's put it as a positive that now, even when you have a good target, you have this array of ways to interfere with it with small molecules, of course, with proteins, with genome engineering, with these degraders, and it's just exploding.
Like, dang.
And so the arsenal. I don't like to use a war. I'm sorry, I got to stop my alarm. Hold on one second. Yes, but this alarm. I apologize.
Your toolbox.
Alexa,
we don't hear the alarm. Oh.
Yeah, sorry about that. It was to remind me. It was to remind me to be on this panel. It was obviously not the right time.
It's late.
Yeah. So the arsenal of tools will make it very exciting, but also confusing about what's the best way to build an intervention. And it might change like lots of things, the economics, the leaders in the field, the ways that what diseases are easy to treat and what diseases are hard to treat. So I think that I don't want to call it confusion, but it might look like a very different world to those of us if we were just transported 10 years ahead. That's my prediction.
Yeah.
That it's going to look very different. I guess to answer your question, it's going to look very different, and it's going to be a much more mixture of approaches towards approaching targets.
Therapeutic. Mm-hmm.
So I think it's always safe to make a prediction that the future will look like now, only more so, right? And so we will always be required to find medicines that are efficacious for the disease we need to treat, that are safe, that have all of these properties to allow us to make them. That's not going to go away. I agree with Russ that there's huge opportunities on the horizon. I love having come to a company that focuses on biologics and small molecules, that has both of those toolkits plus many combinations within it inside. And so that's exciting and opens up the set of tools that we have to play with to influence human biology. But at the end of the day, we still have to influence human biology in ways that are effective, and we have to prove it. I also truly believe that the future will always belong to those people who can, those teams, those individuals, those companies that can harness both the human expertise and these new automation, computational approaches. The cyborg is going to win, not the robot or the human alone.
Right. Okay.
I think I have a slightly different spin on what Russ said, because I agree. I think we're going to have new modalities, but if you look at these new emerging modalities, there's still a small molecule component, whether you're looking at radiotherapy or antibody drug conjugates or, or targeted protein degradation. You still got to be able to design a small molecule. And my hope, at least for the next 10 years from now, is that we have a better understanding of the things that are stumping us right now. Because I think a lot of what stumps us now is we don't have enough of an understanding of all of the off targets that we're trying to avoid. We don't have enough of an understanding of drug metabolizing enzymes and how to design molecules to avoid these liabilities. And I think that through a combination of data generation and advances in structural biology, we can get a lot more of an understanding, and then maybe the things beyond potency, which are really the time-consuming parts of drug discovery now, will become more streamlined.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah, I think biology is always going to surprise us. So I'm sure there's going to be something fundamental, another RNA species or something, who knows, that we won't have been able to take into account. But because of that, and it'll probably take a while, just a much bigger investment in standardizing clinical data, really making the use of clinical trials, patient samples, really make an impact on our data sets that we have to better understand diseases, and a bigger focus in then prevention of diseases as opposed to actually treating them, but just a better general and basic understanding.
Yeah, I would. Those were all terrific thoughts. I would hope. I think it seems. I hope it's clear that 10 years from now, our data landscape, hopefully in biology, will be significantly improved from where we are. I know there's lots of folks working on that, and people are really now sort of taking hold and thinking about how we can really do that effectively. So at least I think we hope to have that to look forward to. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, we can do one more. We could wrap it up. I feel like we've been going for a while. Are there any sort of final thoughts that folks on the panel want to share? Was there some burning question you hoped that I had asked, that I would ask, that I didn't? Closing thoughts. Oh, we're quiet. We talked a lot. Serene, any question from you? Was there anything you want to ask these folks while we have these marvelous people on the hook?
We covered a lot of different topics. All I can say is this was extremely enlightening, and I can hear you all talk for hours, but I'm sure we're all getting tired, and probably we should move forward. So thank you so much for everyone. This was absolutely amazing, and thanks, Rommie, for moderating this.
Oh, sure. Yes, I should just thank you for participating, everyone. I had a good time.
Yeah, and thank you so much for the panelists.